Welcome to Super Meat World. Into this update, we're gonna play a chapter entitled Super Meat Land 2, made by _L_. Definitely not the name that you want to be remembered by, but hey, to each his own. After all, it might just be a serial number, but enough nonsense. It's time for Super Meat Land 2, which is a pretty nice Game Boy themed chapter. There was another one of these chapters which was made, and fittingly enough it was titled Super Meat Land, but I'm not gonna showcase it, mainly on the ground that, well, compared to this one chapter, it really is nowhere near as good. Not only the level design was nowhere near as interesting, but it was also pretty bullshit on a whole lot of standpoints. I mean, there were a lot of instances where you had to do really tiny jumps onto narrow corridors. There are sort of stunts that really aren't fun to pull off in overall. But this chapter in overall is really fun. But, as it's been the case with almost every single chapter of Super Meat World that we've been playing lately, it's just way too hard for most people to play. And yeah, looking at the level design here, I'm pretty sure that you could fall through all of the saw blades in only one jump, based on the fact that the power time for this level is ridiculously low, and if you can manage to pull off this jump, well, kudos for you. I have to say, I've never noticed it before now. There's been a couple other Game Boy chapters made around Super Meat World, but they were nowhere near the levels of this and Super Meat Land, even though I said that it was pretty lackluster in comparison to this one. But I'm mainly talking about levels in which the entire decor is black and white, but yet your character is in a colored mode. In most other Game Boy levels that are made, you don't even get to see the border around the screen. I mean, it seems like an insignificant detail, but come on, it's part of the style of the level. It has to be there. And also, it contributes to make the level really short, so even though those levels are really hard, at least you won't take too much time in order to beat them. As you might have seen with the first couple of levels into the chapter, it has a huge emphasis on being able to do wall jumps correctly. They're usually pretty straightforward and basic, but for the most part these levels are really hard. And once again, the second half of the chapter will be ridiculous in terms of difficulty. It definitely took me quite some time before I was able to finally beat this chapter for the first time. With that said, there's a couple of levels into the chapter which use the formula of going through shaft like this, in and out in order to get keys and all of this. And finally, the final stretch of this level really reminds me of a level into Sea Meat Boy. I mean, the fossils level had a jump like that. Oh, normally you will have to do a jump on the right in order to be able to wall jump all the way here, but unfortunately due to an oversight to the other, you can jump there without any kind of trouble. And even if the blocks were higher, I'm pretty sure that you will still be able to get up there by doing a wall jump off the starting platform that you're there. Unfortunately, there's been a little lack of thought into this one level, but come on, you can't have them to be all perfect. This level, however, requires a lot of timing, and finally you need to be able to do all of those wall jumps up there. But the main difficult part of the level is the middle part with the moving saw blades which are going back and forth at a pretty quick pace. You're definitely gonna have to wall jump into this section in order to be able to make your way down without being caught by the other saw. With that said, it's a lot easier to go up. Now, the final part of this level may seem intimidating, but it's not really that bad. The first jump is the hardest one of the bunch, and the second one you have so much free room in order to be able to do it. So, as you can see, the levels into the chapter do a pretty good job of being varied and offering different challenges and obstacles, even though that the Game Boy tile set really doesn't have a whole lot of obstacles to deal through, with. But then again, all of the levels do a pretty good job of being entirely distinct entities. Into this one level, you have to constantly go forward whenever you're doing those jumps through the saw blades, because otherwise, yeah, the fans will prevent you from advancing any further. So take a long swing and yeah, don't take too much time because otherwise you're simply gonna be pushed once again into the saw blades. It can be pretty nasty, but yeah, this is the kind of level which can be fun to do. I mean, you have to do jumps at full speed, but then again the jumps aren't really all that tricky in order to pull off, and it's pretty manageable. So all in all, while the levels are challenging, at least they remain entertaining for pretty much the entire stretch. This level is probably one of the only levels into the chapter which remind me of the original Super Meat Land chapter, and even then it's a whole lot more lenient. I'm just wondering at this point if I should do another video afterwards where I will briefly showcase some chapters that I wanted to showcase at one point but decided against it due to several reasons. Either because the levels are too bullshit hard, or they weren't good enough, or maybe it was just too run-of-the-mill, so yeah, if some people out there want to see a video like this, just make me know. As for this level, you might have noticed it beforehand, but yeah, there's a shortcut because the saw blades here were not wide enough. Saw blade placement can be a really tricky thing because the hitbox for your character is a little bit smaller than the actual character himself, so there are some times where you'll hit a saw blade and yet you will live, even though you should have died in normal circumstances. As for this level, the level's author really wasn't subtle about the level intent at all, because it was called Feature This, and I'm pretty sure that this level was featured, although it's impossible for me to see because there is no listing of all of the levels that have been featured as opposed to the chapters, and even then you already know that most of the time that you load up the recommended chapters list, you will miss half of them. But yeah, this level is pretty much what the entire chapter is all about. Doing pretty precise jumps, but even then, it really doesn't look all that intimidating. It just looks hard whenever you're finally doing it yourself. Oh yeah, speaking of Super Meatland, this is another one of these levels that kinda look like it, but once again, this is far more lenient. All in all, it's definitely not the most interesting level of the chapter, says he after giving 4 stars. I'm definitely a little bit too generous with the ratings occasionally. Alright, now we're starting to enter the tricky levels of the chapter. This level does a really good job of mixing really precise jumps and timing at the same time, and it's definitely quite tricky due to the fact that the saw blades move pretty fast. And finally, you have to do those jumps around those saw blades in a way so that you won't collide on the moving saw blades, and as you can see, the jumps get narrower as you progress. Oh, and I also like the bridge on the top here. It's a pretty nice touch of decoration. You may only have 4 colors into this game, but that doesn't mean that you must have no detail whatsoever. But yeah, in overall, this is really one of the best chapters out there, which I'd say consists of mainly traditional obstacles. But this one level, however, is far from being traditional. In fact, this level is a huge pain in the ass. The only reliable way of doing those jumps while making it across the fans like that is simply to jump a whole lot like that in order to gain just a little bit of altitude every once in a while. And in the final ascension of the level, it's a whole lot trickier because there's a saw blade in the way. Oh, and wall jump there before you go down, because otherwise you're not gonna have the required time in order to steer yourself between the 2 saw blades down here. So yeah, this is the first level in quite some time to be really, really nasty. But come on, we're gonna do it! We're gonna do it! Here, oh my god! And obviously after making it all the way there, it's obvious that I'm gonna have the darndest of the trouble making it all the way back. You always know that the level is a real bastard whenever it kills you at the very last moment. And even then, there's a masochistic part of yourself which just makes it seem as if it's really fun to die at the end like that. But here we go, we're finally done with this one level. It's definitely not as great as some of the other levels into the chapter. I just don't like the gimmick of pushing your way upward through the fans, and it just makes things a whole lot tedious compared to the other level which did it previously. This is another level that I think you will be able to shortcut, although I didn't really try, because it just seems as if the saw blades can allow you to go through them, but I never really wanted to try it out. Instead, I just end up doing the level the way it's supposed to. You have to do really precise wall jumps into this one level in order to be able to beat it, because if you jump too high, you're simply gonna bang your head against the bridge and you will die, and if you jump too low, well, you'll hit the saw blade instead. Say, this level really looks familiar. Wasn't there another level like that previously into the chapter? Yes, it did, but it's a whole lot nastier this time around, because you can already see that in the place where there's the back and forth saw blade moving around, there's a saw blade in the middle, so you cannot further fall in the between of it all in order to dodge everything in a really easy way like you did with the previous level. The drop downward really is the hard part of the level, because you really have to be precise. You either need to steer yourself to the point of perfection in order to drop straight to Bandage Girl, or you must drop to the wall down here and do a really small wall jump just in order to slow yourself down, but not jump too high so that you'll hit the saw blade. And here we go, that's one way of doing it. But yeah, just looking at this one level, you can already see how the difficulty has scaled ever since the chapter has first advanced. Even though that the first level was pretty hard to begin with, but you can already see that things have gotten a whole lot nastier since then. For quite some time, this was the most puzzling level of the chapter for me, because the final stretch of the level is pretty much the hardest thing about it. In fact, I'm not sure that the way I'm doing it was the way that it was intended by the author, but I cannot see otherwise how you will do it. I suppose that you could be able to jump between the saw blades as they go back and forth, but you will see that I have another way in order to make it through. And I'm really not sure this is how it was intended to do, but here goes nothing. Yeah, this is pretty much the only way that I'm able to do it. I've never really tried jumping between the saw blades back and forth because it just seems inconceivable to do. This level can be really annoying because of the really narrow jump that you have to do here, because you have to do a corner jump in order to get up there, but if you jump too low, you will collide against this one saw blade here, and you have to use pretty much the same trick that you use in Skyscraper in order to do a much tighter corner jump, because otherwise you will simply do that. If you let go the acceleration button and you start pressing it right after you've done the jump, you will have a much bigger acceleration, and therefore it will make it so that your corner jump will be a whole lot tighter. There's a few level authors out there in Super Meat World which make proficient use of this one tactic. And with that said, the rest of the level is not all that hard. I mean, yeah, this part really shouldn't be all that hard, but I'm just messing it up because I really cannot concentrate worth a damn, but yeah, and overall, you get the key and finally you do a wall jump of that really small block in order to get all the way up there pretty much instantly. It's a whole lot easier to get back up there instead of making it up there the normal way, but yeah, you can be sure that I'm not gonna do it. Ho ho ho! This is especially damning because when I first played this level something like 2 weeks ago, well, not the first time that I played it, but yeah, by the way, this was how you do the jump, and here comes the only bandage in the only chapter, and it's really easy to grab. But yeah, the last time that I played this level, I beat it in something like 5 tries, and well, this really isn't nowhere near 5 at all. But hey, you know as the saying goes, you succeed in some things and you will fail miserably in almost every other one. I really like the look of this level, but unfortunately I'm not a huge fan of the level on a gameplay standpoint. It just feels a little bit shallower than most of the other levels. With that said, you still have a couple of pretty neat jumps to pull through, like all of these corner jumps and wall jump around saw blades and another wall jump that you have to do in order to get to the place where you need to go. This level, however, I will have kept it for last because this is hands down the hardest level of the entire chapter. But with that said, I really dig the decoration of this one level. I really love the little antenna that you see at the top. Whoops. Way to make it this far and fail in the most hilarious way possible. Well, it was either that or I was gonna collide against the saw blade at the end, which also is really hard to avoid. But the most annoying part of the level is right here, jumping over the saw blade with the fan pushing you downward in such a narrow hallway is really annoying. Going for the key is easy because you can take a really large acceleration in order to do the jump and dodge the saw blade, but you have nowhere near as much place to wind yourself and do a good running speed in order to jump over, so it's a whole lot trickier. And most of the time that you get the proper speed to jump against the saw blade, you'll usually just run against the other saw blade on the right. With that said, it's a pretty good summary of the chapter. It really combines all of the elements from the chapter in one level, which will make you scream in agony. This one part, however, isn't too bad. As long as you know that you have to start running against the fan and all of this, it really isn't all that hard. But here is the hard part of the level. Can we do it? Here we go. And so we are done with this chapter, which was entitled Super Meat Land 2. I hope that you enjoyed this update, because it really was a fun thing to do, and well, this was a really great final level in order to cap this entire chapter. So, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot about this one level. I really have no clue why this is the final level of the chapter. I mean, you have 2 pretty hard jumps to do, but that's all that the level is. I mean, compared to the other level, this level almost feels insulting, considering how easy it is. I mean, the jump is not that easy, but saying that you want this to be the final challenge of your chapter, I don't know. The previous level was a whole lot better as a final level, but that's beyond the point. We are done with Super Meat Land 2, and coming up next, Rockly Smile will heat your soul with his first chapter, The Lime Key.